If no one has told you this before, let me be the first one to let you know that you, yes, you matter. And completing the 2020 census matters to our community, to Decatur, to Macon County. The 2020 census is critical for us to receive the funding that's needed for job training, better health care, better schools, and for services such as food assistance and housing. It's easy and it just takes a few minutes to complete. Go to 2020census.gov and complete the 2020 census today and let your voice be heard. Welcome to Speak Up, Speak Out, a weekly online forum to discuss issues that's facing our community and working towards enacting real, tangible change. I'm your moderator, Terrence Tat Taylor, radio personality, DJ, essential skills instructor at Richland Community College for the Enrich program, and now the community director of investment here at the Community Foundation of Macon County. I have all of the titles, so many jobs. I want to take this time to thank the sponsors for making this forum possible each week: Crossing Healthcare, the Community Foundation of Macon County, United Way of Decatur and Mid-Illinois, Neuhoff, and the great city of Decatur. You, the audience, are invited to participate. If you have not already, be sure to get in contact with us and submit your questions to speakoutdecatur@gmail.com or online at hot1055.com as well, or nowdecatur.com. I gotta introduce my very special guest for this forum, Raychel Yokem. Got the last name right, didn't I?
You got it right. You got it right.
Yeah. Raychel Yokem, founder of Corporate Kid and Diversity, Inclusion and Affirmative Action Manager at Growmark, Inc. Today's topic is diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace. Raychel, thank you for being on the show.
I'm happy to be here.
Hey,
Great
I'm
show.
happy to be here. Yeah. Oh, it was a process getting you on here.
I know, the struggle.
It was a process. Now, it was a struggle. The struggle was real, but we made it happen. My first question, and we have questions that were sent in as well. What is the biggest piece of advice for getting started with diversity and inclusion within the workplace? Because I know I'm used to being the token Black guy in a situation or in the room. How do you even get started with that process?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. A lot of, I feel like companies and employees will start with a grassroots effort. And while that grassroots efforts with employees kind of getting together and saying, let's do something in the workplace, while that is a feel good for folks, it doesn't really create long-term change and long-term impact. So for me, I think the one thing I would say for those folks that want to get started is that you have to have a conversation with leadership. And you really have to get someone who is at the executive level to commit to being a part of the strategy and a part of the process to be able to take some of it on. You need decision makers in the game. That is really what's going to allow you to move things forward.
Absolutely. And I got to give a big shout out here at the Community Foundation. That's what they've have definitely done, leading by example. We always talk about here in the office of being purposely including individuals, because it's not enough to just have diversity within the workplace. You have to be inclusive. Am I right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, and that's difficult for some people, right? Because when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about different religions. We're talking about atheists, Muslims, and Christians, right? When we talk about including, we're talking about the traditional and the non-traditional family. And so that's sometimes a difficult conversation to have. It's about making a place where everyone can thrive and be successful. And that is difficult when you think about employee resource groups that are meant for one group of people, right? It feels somewhat exclusive. So you have to think about your organization, what your vision and mission and goals are, and make sure that your diversity strategy aligns with that. You don't want to create some diversity plan where the goals are completely different from who you are as an organization, right? Like those things need to be aligned. Yeah, absolutely.
Most definitely. And I know something that's really going on within our community now is the boards.
Mhm.
The boards have predominantly been all white boards that serve a community where the majority that the people that they serve are African American, and now they're like scrambling to try to diversify. Um, with what you do, which I'm happy to announce that we will be working with Raychel, and we got some projects coming up. And if you need someone that will guide you, Raychel is that individual that will take on that mission to help you out. Now, for where do we start? Is it one of those things that they always say from the bottom to the top? But in this situation or scenario, is it from the top to the bottom? Like those in power have to be purposely seeking out diversity and inclusion. So is it top to bottom or bottom to the top?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I'm actually working with an initiative in Springfield called Building Board Diversity. It was started by United Way and Forefront, and they pulled me in. We're excited that we're going to be writing some commitment statements. So that commitment statement will be a commitment from nonprofits that will be making a verbal and written commitment to diversity and looking at the diversity within their boards. It's also a commitment statement for employers to say that they will allow their employees to take part in nonprofit boards, take time away from work to go be a part of that community. And then it's also really just a commitment from the community to go online where there's open board opportunities on the United Way website and show their interest. So I think a lot of people play a role, especially when we're talking about nonprofit board diversity. But really part of that nonprofit commitment is getting through diversity training, because you can get a diverse candidate on your board and not know how to retain, make that person feel welcome. And maybe that candidate is not just a Black or Hispanic candidate. Maybe you have a board full of women and you've got to find a male board member, and that male comes in and they don't know how to have a conversation or relate because of the topics and discussions. So we want to really make sure that boards are prepared to bring someone in and know how to make them feel welcome. So considering things like an annual diversity, equity, inclusion training, doing a demographic survey every year on your board, asking questions about what side of town do you live on? If everyone on the board lives on the same side of town, you're missing a perspective, right? So we're really challenging boards. So I think that it's a lot of that, what you're saying. Is it top down? Yes, it's staff, it's board leadership, but it's people willing to be able to give up even their own personal information for the betterment of the board to say, this is what we're missing. I'm with you.
Oh, hey, that's perfect. And it leads into a question that was submitted. We had as, and with that being said, I will say that here at the Community Foundation, that's why we have every 2 weeks we have our group meetings, and we talk about those diversity and inclusion topics, and we have open and honest conversations, and it's a safe environment to have those conversations. And once again, we'll be having Raychel give us consistent training, because being in our community here is like the one and done training.
Mm-hmm.
They do it for like a 4, 6, or 8 hour session, but all right, we ended racism. Okay, now let's move on to something else. But what we've taken, thanks to Nally Beck here, is we'll be having you, Raychel, come in monthly and have trainings, which I feel is fantastic. Is there something to be said about the consistency that needs to be taking place now?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of diversity, equity, and inclusion work is keeping it in the conversation. And so having those consistent trainings, or even just creating like a task force and putting some focus on diversity, allows you to keep it in the conversation. And that's what's going to make sure that those moments where you forget about it, it's still coming back up. And so some folks may feel like, well, I don't want to just talk about this all the time. But again, it should be aligned in the conversation. You're not just talking about diversity. You're talking about your vision, your strategy, your mission, your purpose, and how diversity and equity align with that. So it should be in every conversation. I think for me, the question that kept coming up and came up in the first meeting we had was really, there were questions from the group around, well, I don't want to change my policies and change the requirements of a board member just to get diversity. And so I think that's a valid point, right? I don't want to take away the financial requirement to get a board member that's maybe younger, that doesn't have the ability to pay that. But what's the alternative, right? Unless we're willing to change the requirements for everyone, if we do nothing, then we're going to keep having these conversations 10 years from now. So I think doing nothing should never be an option. And so if you're not comfortable with changing the requirements for one board member, then figure out what you are comfortable with and do that.
Yes, but something has to be done.
Something has to be done.
Something has to be done. Now, for the first question, how do we get the entire company, including our leadership team, on board with diversity and inclusion initiatives?
I mean, I think there's always this sense of it needs to feel like a connection for them, right? You need to be able to kind of sell it and make it make sense. But at this point, it's really just something where everyone should be held accountable. This should no longer be a conversation of, I need to help you understand why this is important. I think as business leaders, as nonprofit leaders, we should know the stakes. We should look at the data and understand that if we're trying to serve a population, whether it's a low economic population, whether it's a certain racial group, whether it's women, whether it's people with different abilities, we need to be able to understand their perspective. We can't just go in and help folks if we don't know their story. So for me, that conversation of selling it is really just done. Now it's about finding those leaders that are willing to get uncomfortable and ask new questions in order to take the organization where it needs to go.
Most definitely. And the numbers show that companies that have inclusive and diversity, they do better as a company as a whole. They're more innovative. They get, so even on the equity level, the more diverse from the top to the bottom, your organization and the board and so on and so forth, you'll financially profit and do better as a company. The numbers, numbers don't lie. They show it.
Right. And we should know that, right? Even without data, we should know that getting more ideas to the table is going to lead to better results. Absolutely.
But, common sense isn't common, so you have to say it out loud.
That's right. That's right.
Say it out loud. Another question that was submitted, what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a D&I program?
I will say as a diversity person who does this work every day, a lot of times what's difficult for me is not going to be what's difficult for the organization. What's difficult for me is continuing to see scary numbers of people that look like me, scary numbers for women who are continuously being turned down for promotions, minorities who are being given lower performance reviews across the board, across an entire organization. Those types of things just hurt when I leave work, right? Those things are just difficult to continue to hear every day. So I think for me, it's from a mental health standpoint to, make sure I'm surrounding myself with folks that have progress and success stories so that I can kind of keep trucking along. I think for the organization, it's tough because it's an ownership and accountability. And that's just something that as a country, we have not been doing well with, right? I mean, I don't want to bring in politics, but I think we need to realize no matter what side of the fence you're on, we have not been holding ourselves accountable on a Democratic side, Republican side, independent side. As Americans, we need to hold ourselves accountable to really making sure that when we need to make change, when we did something not so well, that we do it better next time. That's what makes our country great. So there's just an opportunity there, even from an organization, where you have to call yourself out and say, this was not how it should have been done, and I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. You got to check yourself before you wreck yourself.
That's right.
When we say political, and I always tell people, like, if you're talking about social justice, systematic racism, systemic racism, politics is part of that. So to be fearful or uncomfortable to talk about politics, that's, the systematic. So I always always be comfortable with being uncomfortable and having those discussions. Like, I don't want to be political. No, let's get political. Man, we got a lot of questions. I'm gonna get you because I know you're busy.
No, you're good. You're good.
What can a company do right now? What if you're the only Black person? How do we level the playing field?
I think if you're the only person, that's difficult, right? Because at this point, you just need to work with your leadership and tell them what you need. Something that I really needed from my team and my leader when everything was happening with the Black Lives Matter movement was I really just needed a place to feel supported, heard. I needed us to be willing to have a conversation about how it was making everyone feel in the workplace. And so I had that conversation with my leader. So I think as just employees, we have to speak up about what are our needs. If you need a day off, if you just need a mental health break, you need to ask for that. In terms of from a broader diversity aspect, what's just something small, even if you want to do something, I think it starts looking at your processes. Yes, you could put up a black box, or you could write a diversity statement, or you could try to come up with a whole strategy. But at the end of the day, I think it's just look at your processes. Look at your applicant pool from last year. How many women, minorities applied, and how many were actually hired? And if you see an opportunity there, that's a great place to start. So I think just going in and looking at some of your processes and going, where have I been ignoring some potential systemic problems, and addressing those first. And you don't need to tell everyone about it. If someone asks what you're doing, you can tell them, we're working on fixing some long-term issues, right?
Yeah, yes, most definitely. And that's something that I have personally felt. Like I said, is one of those things where I'll walk into the room and be the only Black individual or minority within the whole building. Sometimes, even being the first Black individual to be hired with the Community Foundation, to be in this building that we're in, which is 2020. Like, how does that happen? So it's about being purposeful and intentional on your decisions. And you had mentioned about diversity task forces. What types of responsibility does this group take on?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things to think about with a task force. If you create kind of a grassroots task force with just employees that are interested in helping, you might not see much impact from that, right? Again, it might create like a feel good. Employees feel like they're doing something. So from a feeling emotional standpoint, it might feel good. But again, long term, you may not see anything. So from a task force aspect, I think you need to make sure that that task force has some good representation of leaders, including especially your white males. Making sure that their voice is a part of this too, because sometimes the conversation just needs to be, why is that your narrative? What throughout your life has created this narrative, right? Because that might need to be the mindset shift, might need to be your focus. You're thinking about diversity work. Maybe it's just a mindset shift conversation and training that you need to have to help people change their narrative around how they feel about certain groups of people, about persons with a disability and how much they can actually do. So I think that when you think about a task force, you need, again, to have decision makers in that group. And then your task force needs to establish some clear goals for the next year and make sure that they're holding themselves accountable to kind of checking off some of those goals that they've set for themselves.
Boom. Man, that's fantastic. You dropping gems today.
I'm trying.
Another question. When thinking about the importance of representing, this comes from a company, our brand as a diverse and inclusive workforce, they're struggling with wanting to represent our employees from the people that they serve. They're wanting to know, how do we approach people to ask them to be in our photos without making them feel that way, feel like not to tokenize them, not to tokenize anyone, but to make them feel like, hey, we want to represent our brand and our company. We need you to be in the forefront, visually.
Yes. So I love this because it always comes up, and I'm like, do they really think that people don't know what they're doing? Like, we're all aware of what's happening. So I think there just needs to be a transparent and vulnerable and open conversation that says, hey, Raychel, we really want to represent women in this photo, and we'd love for you to come and be our representation, not only of women, but of Black women. Are you willing to do that for us? And then I can show up as my true Black female self and be that representation for you, right? So I think you just need to have a vulnerable conversation about, this is what we hope to accomplish. Do you think, and somebody might go, no, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that person for you, and say, I appreciate you being honest with me and telling me. I'll try to see, do you have any ideas of how we can represent? What would you recommend, right? And get their idea, because I may not mind, but another Black woman might, and that's okay, right? But I think we just need to be honest and say exactly what we're trying to accomplish.
Oh, that's perfect because, hey, just being transparent and communicating, being open and honest is what I tell my white family and friends and allies. It's like, hey, they get too much in their head. Like, I don't want to come off as being racist. Well, hey, just talk to me. Then it's either a yes or a no, but you're still having that conversation. What are some creative ways? I know you touched on this earlier. What are some creative ways to proactively source candidates from underrepresented communities? What's the best way to, like, all right, this is Darius and Jonathan, or
Yeah,
something.
I think that sourcing candidates is really the most difficult, because ultimately it's about just getting your organization's name out there so that people even know who you are, so that when opportunities come up, folks will apply. But I do think that if you are an equal opportunity employer and an affirmative action employer, it is okay to state those things. So go to places, go to groups with women, go look at Black fraternities and sororities, go look at Latinx, organizations, and figure out, maybe it's a financial partnership, but it's making sure that you're reaching out and saying, hey, we have open opportunities and we're an equal employment opportunity and we are always striving to diversify our team. Do you have anybody that you can send us? I think that, just having those conversations, but it's going to be an awareness piece. But on the process side, I always go back to process. When you ask those folks to apply, do your recruiters and the folks sourcing really to transfer their skills? Because maybe they haven't worked in that industry before. Maybe they haven't done that work, but do they understand how their education can translate? Because you might be missing out on candidates because your recruiting team doesn't really understand how skills from another industry or job could transfer over and how that could still be a qualified, viable candidate. So make sure that you look at the process too.
And it's all a process. The whole thing is a process. How do you counteract the comments from leadership positions, such as, we just hire, and I hear this all the time, we just hire or promote the best person for the job, regardless of race or gender? Like, I've heard many a time. Personally.
When I feel like I should be paid $1 when people say that, because I'd be a billionaire. Right? Billionaire, right? So can I get paid? Can we get paid every time someone says that? Or I need to get a t-shirt or something. We know you're going to hire the most qualified person. You to hire the most qualified person. The thought process that someone who is a woman or minority or person with a disability is not the most qualified person is the problem. We want you. Yes, that's the problem. The fact that you think that those groups aren't in the qualified pool. They are. So we're asking you to increase the pool with more of those folks so that when you're looking for that qualified person, you're probably going to also find them in one of those other categories. So it's your mindset that we're asking you to change, right? Because we know that qualified is not one race and qualified is not one gender. We understand that. Yes. So we need to make money from that phrase.
Oh man. Whoo. We should have. That's why I left that as the last question. Now, Rachel, can you let everyone know how they can reach you? Because once again, you'll be extra active. I know you're in high demand. We'll be having you facilitate our diversity trainings here at the Community Foundation, and we'll be having a free to non-for-profit organizations training. There'll be a one-day training for the non-for-profit leaders, CEOs, board members, all of the above. How can they reach you?
Yes, so you can definitely go to my website, corporatekin, KIN.com, and you can reach out to me there. My email is corporatekinrachel, that's RAYCHEL, @gmail.com. So you can just reach out to me on my website or via email. We could look at the calendar and see what we can do, but I'd love to help. There's a variety of things I could help with. It could just be a one-time where we come in and take a look at your policies and processes, and I give you some ideas about what you might need to look at and consider changing. And then you work within your HR team and your leadership team to make those changes. Or it could be diversity training, kind of like what we're doing with the Community Foundation there. But I'd love to help. Absolutely.
Awesome. This has been Speak Up, Speak Out. I want to thank my very special guest, the one and only Raychel Yokem. Did I pronounce it right?
You got it right. You got it right.
Yeah, I'm horrible with names, but I'm getting it. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm Terrence Tat Taylor. Remember to catch Speak Up, Speak Out every Saturday at noon on Hot 105.5's Facebook page. But you can join in on the conversation anytime. Email your questions at speakoutdecatur@gmail.com. Message me on my Tat page or on the Hot 105.5 Facebook page. Thank you to our sponsors again, Crossing Healthcare, the Community Foundation of Macon County, of course, United Way of Decatur and Mid-Illinois, Neuhoff Media, and the City of Decatur. And last thing before we go, as always, please speak up and be counted. The census is so important. It's critical for our community to receive the funding that we need from everything from job training to better schools to better health care and the important services like food distribution and housing assistance as well. So make sure you get your census done. It takes 4 minutes to complete. 9 questions, easy questions. Go to 2020census.gov and be heard today. Raychel, you've been the best. Thank you.
Every 10 years, the U.S. Census gives communities across America the chance to get the funding they need. But there's a catch. The money is based on counting an accurate number of residents in each state. The fewer people we count, the less money Illinois gets. Illinois has received nearly $60 billion from the federal government based on numbers from the last census. Every person who doesn't fill out the census means less money for Illinois. That's money we could use for new school programs to help our children thrive and succeed, for building new bridges that would help you travel safely on your morning commute, for paving roads and ensuring more reliable public transportation, and for improving our hospitals and clinics so everyone gets the best health care. In Illinois, we deserve our fair share, and it starts with all of us being counted. Visit my2020census.gov or text 987-987 to learn how you can fill out the census today.